Okay, Bereshit, Perek Gimel, Pasuk Chaf Beis. Vayomer Adonai Elohim, Hein ha'adam haya ka'achad mimeno, ladas tov v'ra. And Havaya Elohim said, Hein ha'adam. So the word Hein here, I'm not sure if it has a translation. It's like behold, like hine. Yeah, Hein also, that means them, plural, feminine. But here that's not what it means. But it's like hine, behold, right? It's Hein, lo, right? Behold. Ha'adam haya ka'achad mimeno. Man, haya. It sounds like he has become, he was, right? He has become ka'achad mimeno, like one of us. Who's Hashem talking to? Ladas tov v'ra, to know good and evil. Ve'ata, and now, pen yishlach yado, lest he stretch his arm. V'lakach gam me'etz ha'chaim, and he will take also from the tree of life. What's this tree of life? V'achal v'chai la'olam, and he will eat it, and he will live forever. So once again, Havai Elohim says, behold, man has become like one of us to know good and evil. And now, lest he stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat it, and he will live forever, we can't let that happen. This is a great concern, and that is the verse before. It says that God drove him out of Gan Eden, etc., to put the cherub there. We'll get to these psukim. But anyway, so this declaration, who is God talking to? And what is the concern? And why does it say, pen yishlach yado, lest he stretch out his hand, v'lakach, and he took, and he will take, v'achal, and he will eat. Why don't we just say, lest pen yochal, lest he eat from the tree of life? Okay, so Boaz, you have those questions? Who's God talking to when he says, oh no, he's like one of us now?
It's mirror imaging the pasuk when Chava stretched out her hand. Stretch out her hand to eat.
One second. Vatikach miperio. Vatikach. Just says, and she took. And that was because the Alshech pointed out that the whole thing was if Adam thought that it would be okay as long as he didn't eat. Right? But it just says vatikach. And here in this pasuk it says pen tishlach yado. He's going to outstretch his hand. And v'lakach. And he will take. V'achal. And he will eat. Why does it have to say all that stuff? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. What's the tree of life, Boaz? Do you know what the tree of life is? Eitz chayim hi. Tree of life. There's only one tree of life. It's the Torah.
The one in the garden.
The Torah. The Torah is called the tree of life.
Oh.
To all those that hold on to it. Okay, so let's see what the Alshech HaKadosh has for us today. Okay, I'm on page 52, Nun Bet, on the bottom, last paragraph. No, I'm sorry. I'm on 53, Nun Gimel, last paragraph on the page. Okay, Hine, behold, Kol ha-pasuk mishulal havana, the entire verse is lacking in understanding. V'yitachen yomar, and it is reasonable to say, she'amar hu yitbarach l'falma yashamala. It must be that God is addressing his heavenly entourage. Hein adam, behold the man, v'hu b'haktim, ki ma shegazar hu yitbarach mita al adam, v'zar yotav, v'lo anash acher, v'ya'amod chai la'olam, halo hu, ki me'az bara hu yitbarach ha'olam, haya l'shetiyah lo dira b'tachtonim. Okay, so let's just say that when God is addressing, he's addressing the angels, and in order to introduce a brief introduction, that this masha gazarhu yitbarach, that God decreed death al adam v'zar yotav, on man and his future generations, v'lo onesh acher, not a different alternative punishment that would allow him to remain alive, v'yamod chai le'olam, meaning a guy could have punished him in multiple ways. It didn't have to be that he should die and that this should be the lot of the species, but rather let him stay alive in a diminished state and bear some sort of punishment. Halohu, why did God do it that way? Ki mi'az barahu yitbarach haolam, from when God initially created the world, the the mandate, the agenda was, the purpose of creation was that God should have a dwelling place in the lower world. Shehu sheyiyu bnei ha'adam merkava shchinato. And that means that the children of man would serve as God's merkava, his chariot, the chariot for his divine presence, the Shechina, be'etzem, beguf v'nefesh, bilti ma'akev ha'chomer. And this would be done through a union between man's physical and spiritual parts, his body and his soul, without the material part of him getting in the way, not to allow the chomer to be ma'akev. So basically, in a human being's living life in a way that it's an exalted spiritual experience, and his physicality is being elevated and it's not getting in the way, that in turn turns the lower world into a dwelling place for the Shekhinah by allowing a human being to be a chariot for the Shekhinah. Okay? So that was the point, and the only way that man could do this is by if his materiality had the proper place and it didn't mitigate him. Okay, that initially even his material self was meant to be as refined as what we hope for after the resuscitation of the dead. Because even the material parts of our being will be sublime and luminous like the sapphire, the divine sapphire. Ma'od, very much, me'ena nefesh, almost to the degree of the soul. If man would not have sinned, he would have still been that way from the beginning. Kanoda, like it is known, because that's what happened after he sinned. His material part, his physicality became coarse. Like we spoke about in reference to the verse that talked about that God made garments for them out of skin and he clothed them. And therefore, man does not have the ability at this juncture to refine his fallen physicality until it basically gets softened and pulverized in the crucible of the earth. And then he'll be made into a new being through the upper sublime dew. That's a reference to, it says the Tchiat HaMeitim, coming back from the dead, comes from the divine dew. Tal Tchia. Al Kain Huchracha Hamita Kolelet, and therefore it was imperative that there should be a death, an actual general death, that even the righteous will not be able to avoid it. Even every righteous person who lives beyond the chet, still, if he's born, if he's immortal, then he still has to die. At least 1 hour, 1 moment, before the resuscitation of the dead. Milashuv la'afaran, in order to return from their dust. Because in life, their true vitality is not possible. Even in the event, by the event of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, on the level of the first 2 luchot, before they were broken, that was a time that we know historically that Am Yisrael were shayach. They were capable of being elevated beyond other Rishon's fallen state, and they were cleaned from the toxins of the snake, and yet, niskalkalu ba'egel, they messed it up with the egel. So, the Alshech is saying, just first point, we have to get clear, why is it that Adam has to die in order to receive the tikkun, and he can't bring the tikkun from his fallen state at that point. And, in Jewish philosophy, they talk about how to transform from one being to another. You must undo your being first and become nothing. You have to go from yesh to ayin and then back to yesh, right? Like they say that every stage of something has its own unique identity, and it has to undo that in order to become something else. There's a discussion, the Navi talks about the onset of Mashiach, or the bringing of Mashiach. It's called a sprouting at Tzemach David, and the Mefarshim talk about how in order to sprout first, if you look at a seed, it has to totally disintegrate first and break down and decompose before the new life can be expressed. So somehow, once there's the ramifications of the sin, in that state, Adam's physical being now has become a physical being in a way that is incapable of fulfilling the purpose of creation, and therefore he has to be undone in that incarnation, so to speak, in order to be reborn anew in his fulfilled state.
I've got two questions.
Yeah.
First, begs the question, why can't Teshuvah fix that without death? That's the
Why
first.
can't tshuva?
Fix it without death? And
yeah.
secondly, how did Avraham become a Merkavah if you have to die to be able to become refined enough in the body to be able to become a Merkavah?
Right. So he certainly was not on the Merkavah in the way that they were meant to. This, we've been. This is enough for now, actually. But this is a very long discussion that we've been having actually for the past 3 days about the role. How can you say that the Shekhinah came down? All the people that are buried in Marat Machpelah, all are keneged they all represent they correlate to one of the Rakiyas, and their life's work, their legacy was to bring the Shekhinah down one. So we say, the question came up, how could you say that the Avot were capable of bringing the Shekhinah all the way back down if we're saying that the Shekhinah is not down yet? So we talked about the different, so first of all, it's important to know that there's a Or HaChaim HaKadosh, a beautiful Or HaChaim HaKadosh in Parshat Vayigash, that talks about when God tells Yaakov Avinu that he can go down to Mitzrayim, and don't worry, I will go down with you. So the Or HaChaim HaKadosh raises several questions about what is the Shekhinah? Because we say the Shekhinah is not here, it is here. The Shekhinah told Yaakov he's going to go down to Mitzrayim, but we have so many chazals that say the Shekhinah never went into Mitzrayim. That's why he had to appear to Moshe. God had to appear to Moshe in the sneh outside of Mitzrayim because he couldn't go in, and we have all these, and yet the Shekhinah was in because we said Mashchit. So then he brings a Gemara in Brachot that says, a famous Gemara, one of many that he brings, that says that 10 members of Israel that come together immediately, the Shekhinah is sure on them. And the Gemara brings a pasuk, and the Gemara says not just 10, but then it starts going through all these different numbers. When 3 people get together, when 2 people learn Torah together, when even one person. So the Or HaChaim HaKadosh asks what's going on here. So he says Shekhinah is a relative term. For example, we already spoke about in the Alshech that even when the Shekhinah is down to earth to the degree that there's a localized physical, geographical location where the Shekhinah is present to the point where that bubble of that location takes on a new reality, new physical reality, like for example where you have a domain within the Har Bayit that is beyond space. The Aron HaKodesh doesn't fit in the space of the Kodesh HaKodashim, or everybody is cramped, but when they bow, all of a sudden there's space, or time. You have these places where that clearly the Shekhinah is present. It's a different reality. So when the Shekhinah was moving around in the Midbar, with the Mishkan, that the Shekhinah was down here on earth in a way that it's not here now. So the idea is that we're talking about a total vision that is beyond more what we're talking about. And yet the going back to the Avot, the contribution of the Avot was that on the personal level, in the mitigated state, they transcended that limitation and made it possible and earned that right and kept that going and hewed those highways to ultimately fulfill the ultimate level. They took the whole trajectory back, meaning without them, man was constantly going downhill. And what they did was they made it possible, and in their own very local way, but in a real way, in a micro way, achieved that.
So why does he need to die? Why does Avram need to die?
Because even Avram himself, he did that in the fallen state, with the realities of a fallen state. Ultimately, it's because of them. I mean, they did not. I'll tell you. We say on the one hand that the tzaddikim, right, that they can purify their bodies to the point where they do not experience decomposition. They don't have a rima v'tolea. So, and the Alshech says still, right, they've achieved that on the fallen state to the degree where there's like an ot on them, there's a sign that they are not, right, they even elevated their foot. So why do they die? Let's start with why do they die. So we say that there are 4 people that died only be'itchio shel nachash, because of the bite of the snake. But in terms, right, on the one hand, Chanina ben Dosa says, Eina arid memit elachet, right, the serpent doesn't, or the death only comes because of sin, right? If a person was totally sinless, they would never die. But the Gemara also says there were 4 that never sinned, and they only died because... So there's something about this state, the fallen state, that these are the realities now, that everybody has to die. And everybody even has to decompose in order to achieve their higher physical self that is ultimately, that was meant for. But in that state, what they're able to do, and the fact that they do it, is actually what makes it possible, right? Even in the fallen state, there are limitations. A tzaddik still has to die. Even if a tzaddik doesn't decompose, they still have to decompose at the last second in order to achieve. They cannot yet achieve the body that they were meant to achieve, starting with the body that they were given to at birth. So that's, meaning there's the general... ultimate vision that only God can ultimately rectify and set back up, but it's to the great credit of those tzaddikim, the avot and the tzaddikim, in that fallen state, that are still being yonik from somewhere else, achieving somewhere else, even given the limitations of this reality, showing that it's possible to go beyond it and earning that right. But yet there's a cap. There's a cap on what is given till that's ultimately achieved. You know, Moshe Rabbeinu also, in a way, he was immortal, but he also died because of, I don't want to say a sin, chas v'shalom. You know, it's interesting. He didn't really sin either. Whatever. Those are all realities of a fallen state and God working things out through a historical process, etc. But anyway, I hope that gives you enough to think about, to put things in their order. Okay. V'navo el ha'inyan. God addressed the ministering angels. Man's like one of us now. Now he's like one of the angels. What he meant to say was that really man initially was like one of us, meaning that his physicality did not stop him from the ability for the divine presence to rest on him. Like the angels.
That's why it's in the past tense.
Yeah. Kain hayazach. So he was pure. However, nimshach, he was attracted, pulled to the realities of lada, tovara, to know good and evil, v'nit aker chamro, and his physicality became coarse. Ve'al kain, and therefore, rifuat ta'ala, la'alot b'ma'ala hayoto merkava l'shchina beguf ha'nefesh, hayta lo gzerat hamita. And therefore, the balm, the salve, the medicine arises that in order for him to be returned to his elevated state of being a chariot for the divine presence with an integration of both body and soul, he requires the decree of death. And therefore, if he sticks around in the garden, he's going to stretch out his hand, and he's going to eat from the tree of, he's going to take from the tree of life, and he'll eat, and he'll live forever, and he will permanently seal his state, his fallen state, in an immortal sense. He won't be able to die now, and he'll never come to his tikkun, and he will never be metakein the world in a way that the world can be a dira l'tachtonim, a divine dwelling down here on earth. Okay? So the pshat level is, somehow, if you eat from this Eitz HaChaim, you magically get to live forever, right? You know, who is it? Amerigus Vespucci? Or who went to Florida looking for the Fountain of Youth?
Ponce de Leon.
Ponce de Leon, right. What's the Fountain of Youth called in the mythos of the conquistadors? Do you remember?
I don't.
Okay. It's not El Dorado. That has to do with the gold. Okay, so the tree of life is somehow seen here. We have to understand really what it is. But in the story level, there's this tree that if he would eat from, he would subvert his entire tikkun process. So we can't have that happen. Now, what would be the function of a Eitz HaChaim then? And if man was never meant to die, why would there be a tree of life that if you eat from it, you live forever?
That's a great question.
What is this thing for? What is it?
Great question.
Okay.
And also, did you not say that the Eitz HaChaim was the Torah?
Well, that's going to be all the answer. Yeah.
In which case, why wouldn't you want him to eat from it?
Eitz HaChaim. Right? Eitz HaChaim, the pasuk says Eitz HaChaim Hi. It's referring to the Torah. The Gemara says it could be a Sama Chaim or Sama Mavet. It could be a salve, a potion of life, or potion of death. How can the Torah be a potion of death? Especially if it's a Eitz HaChaim. V'im nomar, if we will say, Shelo yachazor amro mimenu el malachei hashares, Shelo haya kol olam hu yitbarach al atzmo chalila, yitachein. Okay, so he says, if you want to understand, right, when the verse says that he will be like one of us, Yashakach Todarba. If when God says he'll be like one of us, he's referring to the angels, and you have a problem with God including himself with the angels, chas v'shalom, that God should include himself with them, right? If you look at the word, focus on the word hein adam, right? We said that word hein. What is the hein here? This gets very drushy. Okay? Let me explain to you the hein. Okay? This is like our rabbis, that the Chazal, they explained, Lidrosh Teva Kayotze Ba, Ki Hine Shte Otiot Elohein. He's going to show now, through the significance of the letters themselves, the symbolic meaning of the word Hein. Bilti mitchabrot im shum ot. He said the Hey and the Nun are two letters that don't connect with any other letter. Ki Aleph et Tet olim Yud. Okay. Aleph and Tet are 1 and 9, so together they're Yud, which is 10. V'chen, Bet, V'chet, or Bet V'chet. The Beis and the Ches are 2 and 8, they become 9. I'm sorry, they become 10. V'gimel, V'zayin, and 3 and 7 become 10. V'chen Dalet, V'vav, so 4 and 6 become 10. Achahei, Ein Lachibur, but 5 doesn't have a pair when you match them up.
Very funny.
Okay?
Yeah.
V'chein hanun. If you follow the same formula, the nun is the same way. Ki yud v'tzadi olim mea. Tzadi is 90, and yud is 10, that becomes 100. And if you keep on going, everything is mitchaber, but nun is 50, just like the hey is 5, it ends up in the same place. So hey doesn't have a partner, right? Hey doesn't have a partner between 1 and 10 to connect to become yud, which is shleimut, and nun doesn't. So
Unless he partnered with himself.
Right, which meaning it doesn't have a zivur. It's just itself, right? So it's all alone. It's unique, right? Ki yud. Okay, so ve'al kain hayu lamashal al dvarim bilti mitchabrim. So the word hein is a note, a symbolic note to something that has no peer, nobody to connect to. Uvazei yomar hein ha'adam, and that's this deeper significance, the meaning in the word hein ha'adam. That's why it doesn't say hein, hine ha'adam. Behold the person. Lomar, to say ki shnei chalkei ha'adam, the two parts of man, hakol lemato, that are integrated to make him, meaning his body and his soul, his physicality and spirituality. Asher hem negdiim zel zeh, they are against each other. They will not connect. Shehem chomer v'tzura, that is form and substance. Hayah hakol ke'achad mimeno, that was at one point both those were indistinguishable. They were integrated within him like one. Like the one of his being, meaning the unique aspect of his being, which is his soul, meaning that his body was like his soul. Okay, mashmaut milat echad, and that's why the verse says he will be like one of us, or he was like one of us, meaning he was unified, that the two parts of him were together as one, and not only that, on the level of the unique one of the two. Right? You follow?
I think so.
Okay.
The body and soul basically was like the soul.
Exactly. Okay.
Which was like the angels.
Right. And if you note in the pasuk, the vowelization of the word achad is with a patach under the aleph and not a kamatz. Shehu hamiyuchad. When you have a patach underneath, it means it's like signifying the choicest of something. Kamadat amar, like you say, like it says in the verse in Bereshit, shachav achad ha'am. The one of the nation lay, meaning the distinguished member, the unique one in that nation. V'akavana, and the intent is ki hanegdiim sheba'adam hayu kim yuchad shemimeno atzmo. So what we, from our perspective, in our current state, see as two opposites two warring parts of us that are not integrated. They were initially integrated in Adam's essence, to the degree that even his physicality was considered to a degree like his soul. And he was worthy of having the divine presence rest on him with great cleaving, an essential cleaving without any sort of admixture or detrimental admixture presented by his material. However, Bachar Ladat Tovara, he chose to know, to experience a perspective of good and evil. Ve'ata, now, she'en chamro domeh lenafsho. Now, in his current state, that his physicality is not like his spirituality, ki nitaker, because it has become darkened and coarse. Pen yishlach yado, lest he stretch out his hand, etc., etc. Ubli mita, and without death, lo yusar chalat chamro, the illness, the affliction of his physicality will not leave him, will not leave mimenu from him, velo yitukan, and it will not become rectified. Lachein, therefore, the next verse says, vayishachehu, and he sent him from the garden. Okay? So that's the explanation of the words in the verse, that he will become like one of us, and what it means one, and why we have to preclude him from eating something that will make him live forever. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Should we do another paragraph?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. V'inyan amro she'yikach v'yochal v'chai. And the reason why the verse says, and he will take, and he will eat, and he will live. The Gemara in Shabbat says, "Ki besiluk David HaMelech alav hashalom." You know the story how David HaMelech passed away.
Yeah.
So just to briefly say over, David HaMelech was learning Torah. He was engaged deeply in Torah, and as long as he was learning, the Malach HaMavet couldn't get him. So the Malach HaMavet had to resort to creating some sort of distraction and lifting David from his engagement in Torah, and that's when he had power over him. Okay, so with David HaMelech's expiration, Haya Osek BaTorah, he was involved in learning Torah, Kol Oto Hayom, the entire day, V'lo Yachal Malach HaMavet Lagash Elav, and the angel of death could not approach him, L'kachet Nafsho Ad Shepasak, and he could not reap his soul until David HaMelech stopped learning. V'chein Rebbe, and also by Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, a similar story, Alav HaShalom, peace be upon him, Ad she'hashivcha shlicha kli mehagad. There was a maidservant that dropped, she threw a vessel, some sort of vessel, from the roof, umin havarat hashvira, and from the articulation of sound of the shattering of this vessel, hifsik, it stopped him, it distracted him, or got his attention from his learning, v'niftar, and he passed away. Ken yomar hu yitbarach. So that's what God is saying here. Im yishar Adam began Eden. Adam is going to stay in this heightened, rarefied atmosphere of Gan Eden. Yikach me'etz hachayim. And he's going to be learning Torah, like David HaMelech and Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Shehu inyan esuk sodot HaTorah. That has to do with dealing with the deepest mysteries and dealing with the most innermost dimensions of the Torah, the highest connection. Ki al derech hasod haytalo. Because all Adam had, to remind you, in terms of his engagement in Torah, was also through the pnimiut and through the sodot, as we said. Vayidei asko ba, and through an involvement with the Torah on that level, o mitzvotea, and the mitzvot on the level of spirituality, hayamashpia shefa, he would continue to bring shefa, as we do today. Umatzmiach umagdal atzei Eden, and he would cause the manifestations of trees and all kinds of flora that were expressions of the spiritual lights of the Torah and their mitzvot. Like we have explained earlier. When God instructed Adam la'avdo to cultivate it, u'lishamro, and to protect it, meaning to cultivate the garden and to protect it, that was an instruction to engage with the Torah and be involved with the mitzvahs on a spiritual level to produce these spiritual lights. Hine be'achos b'Torah, in grasping onto the Torah, shehu amro, that it says, v'lakach gam me'etz chaim, and he will also take from the tree of life. You know, the verse says, etz chaim hi lamachazikim bo. Oh, I'm sorry. Ki lekach tov nasati lachem. It is a lekach. It is a good taking. We are encouraged to take from the Torah, right? So V'lakach gam me'etz hachayim efshar yochal. So even if he takes from the Eitz HaChaim, maybe he'll eat. Meaning taking is distinct from eating. Sheyehaneh, he will personally benefit ke'ochel, like it's food. V'ya'arev lo be'ofen lo yitbatal me'etz HaChaim. And he will feed himself, and it will be mixed and mingled within him in a manner that it lo yitbatal me'etz HaChaim. He will not be nullified from the tree of life. V'lo yuchal malach hamavet lageshet shama. And the angel of death won't be able to grab him. Ki ein sham davar yafsikeh, and there's nothing to distract him, to stop him from directly being involved in the Torah. Kasher haya b'David HaMelech alav hashalom, just like in the case of David, u'beRebbi, and with Rav Yehuda Hanasi, alav hashalom. Al kein, therefore vayishachehu.
I see. So you're saying that the Eitz HaChaim is Torah, and that engaging in that means that the Satan can't kill him.
Right, but God is happy when we do it. Adam's like, uh-oh, I gotta go to Kollel now. I'm in trouble. I gotta hide out from the Malcham Avos. I'm gonna glue that Gemara to my fingers. Yeah, it's what could to replace a narrative with another narrative that's not really elucidating. There's something much, much deeper. Meaning everything that the Alshech HaKadosh is saying is very, very deep. Yeah. And I wish we had time to really, really get into it and think about what it is. Yeah, because it's all very still on the level that he is articulating to us. It seems kind of symbolic and yeah.
But the fascinating irony of the whole thing is that let's take him out of the Gan Eden in case he studies Torah.
Yeah, and yet, right, once the Avot fixed what they fixed, and Am Yisrael was purified through Yetzias Mitzrayim, we were given a Torah. Now all of a sudden, even in our fallen state, that's not a bad thing. If anything, that brings the rectification of the world and can ultimately heal humanity.
Right.
So where's the boomerang? Where's the what changed and stopped and brought? That needs to be understood. Bichlal, part of the
that idea, Moshe Rabbeinu when it came to Eretz Yisrael, built the synagogue, and
it never would have been destroyed.
so it was like a safety mechanism. It sounds like.
So I'm going to introduce a couple points here. This may be maddening to some because I'm going to raise some questions. I'm not going to present answers now, but these are introductions how to think about certain things. Part of the conversation that we've been having, Chaim, if you recall, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's entire relationship with the Avot never ever mentioned giving of the Torah. And even though Chazal talk about to varying degrees how they were involved in Torah personally, God never says, I'm going to give you guys the Torah, I'm going to give your kids the Torah. Torah was not mentioned to them at all. Never. It was all about Eretz Yisrael. And now all of a sudden, right, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Am Yisrael, right, that they got to get the Torah in order to get to the land. The Torah is a prerequisite. And not only that, but we know, right, like the Ramban is always quoted as saying that the mitzvot really only have a kiyum in Eretz Yisrael. That of course you have to keep mitzvot everywhere in the world, but they're not really doing their thing, or you're not really accessing and actualizing unless it's done here. This is the medium. And not only that, but the Torah says so many times that your only connection to Eretz Yisrael, it's reliant on the keeping of the mitzvot. That's why you're here. And when you don't have a hold on the land, right? So the question, and another element is, we know that Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world Bereshit b'shvil Yisrael, shenikra Bereshit, b'shvil Torah shenikra Bereshit. The two axes that Chazal pinned the meaning of creation on is either God, one way of saying it is either God wanted to give a Torah to Yisrael, or God created Yisrael because he wanted to give the Torah to someone. So where does Eretz Yisrael fit in that? There's right. If you want to talk in terms of Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, I'm sorry, Torah and Am Yisrael, why has God only talked to the Avot about Eretz Yisrael and not the Torah? And the first 26 generations were only, meaning Hashem was just waiting to give us the Torah. So the world. So why is the relationship between God and the Avot? It seems to be precluded from any sort of official giving over of the Torah. And yet it's all about Eretz Yisrael. So what's primary to us? Is it the Torah? Is it Eretz? What? How do you work on this?
It's almost a side thing because we know the Avot kept the Torah, but it was like voluntarily kept the Torah. So
right.
The key was the land.
They were not mechayev. Right. Now Hashem did give them specific mitzvahs that they were chayev, but he did. Right. So obviously, in the story of the Avot, it seems it's so clear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the whole reason why he made a world was to give the Avos Eretz Yisrael. But that's not at all what Chazal talk about. They talk about the Torah. And yet we're waiting to be able to actually keep the Torah, and which can only be done in Eretz Yisrael under certain conditions. So first of all, obviously, the idea of getting an Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael is a fulfillment of putting an Adam in a God. It's an exact parallel. That would have been the rectified state.
Israel
Is
represents Adam.
Tam Kuriyam Adam, and
And
Eretz Yisrael is the
is
physical. In this world, that's meant to become Gan Eden. Meaning that's whatever Gan Eden served, right? And the Shechina and Asherat HaShechina and a dwelling place. Meaning the microcosm is Har Bayit, Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and that would be a tikkun, right? That's what, right? So what is this whole thing about? God created the world because He wanted to give the Torah to a world, so He made a Yisrael to receive, or God wanted. To connect to a Yisrael, so he made a world so He could give the Torah to Yisrael. Meaning, however it is, because Chazal say, what's the point? Is Yisrael the point or the Torah the point? And the Eliyahu Hanavi says it's both. It's their spiritual root comes from the same place in creation. So how do you understand all this? I'm just putting all that on the table.
It's
but I
beautiful.
think it's relevant to all. It's very
beautiful.
important. Yeah,
it's beautiful because we see here that in the Gan, there was the Gan and there was the Adam. In other words, Israel and the Jewish people.
Right. La'avdol l'shamro is mitzvos haseh, mitzvos lo haseh. The Eitz HaChaim is the Torah. So on the one hand, God is telling Adam Rishon here, He's telling the angels, we can't have all this. This is not a good arrangement. And yet, we see once the Avot started the Tikkun, that is the arrangement. I'm noting some things. I'm starting some maybe conversations that you can have with yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So should we pause here?
But it's still some more time.
Okay, so O Yomar. Alternatively, maybe another kinech. Im nifaresh, if we explain, she'amro yitbarach, that God said lo tochal mimeno, when God said don't eat from it, telling Adam don't eat from it. Hu shelo haya makpidim haya nechnas biyadiyat chekirut tov v'ra im lo haya ochel v'ne'ana mimeno. Like we always said, like. Let's say you want to make a distinction, like don't eat from the philosophical conclusions of the Greeks, but if you want to walk through their line of thinking, compare, contrast, just experience it, see it, but that doesn't mean, as long as you resolve not to, take any conclusions seriously, and it would have been okay if man didn't eat from it. But as long as he could have taken from it, he could have looked at it, he could have scratched it and smelled it, right? So if you would have said that lo tochal mimeno means that only God was makpid, that he should not engage.
Makpid means?
To be insistent, to be, no, there's a better word. When you're, it's a unique word. It means, to have a hakpada means that also like when you're angry at somebody for something. But it means an insistence, to be makpid, to insist, Okay, shelo haya makpid, that God would not have been insisted, im haya nechnas b'yediyat chakirot tov v'ra, if Adam would have been engaged in all kinds of philosophical analysis of what good and bad is, the nature of good and evil, right? Im lo haya ochel v'ne'ana mimeno, as long as he didn't eat from it. Meaning, if he could have promised that reading Nietzsche, on good and evil, it wouldn't have affected how he thought about things, and he just wanted to understand what Nietzsche was going through, and where Nietzsche was wrong, and
it's an intellectual,
right? Then maybe, but the truth is also we don't have room for elective intellectual processes that don't yield closeness with God in our being, because everything we're supposed to be doing at all moments, we're trying to take whatever our experience is and put it back into our relationship with Hashem. But let's just say, for fun's sake, he had 15 minutes every day that he was allowed to read books from the comparative religion department. Okay, so, who svarat minut, right? As long as he doesn't come to some sort of reasoning of heresy. If he would have been engaged in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but he wouldn't actually literally eat from it, shehu, which means choker b'drishotav, he would go to debates in all kinds of or read through all kinds of analysis of alternative philosophy, but he could assure that not a speck would cleave to him from that which is off limits. Rak nichnas b'shalom v'yotzeh b'shalom. Rather, he would enter in peace and be able to leave, walk away in peace. Like the Mikubalim say regarding Avraham. Avraham was a master of debating religion. So he knew all the different, like the Rambam says himself that he read, I forgot how many treatises on Avodah Zarah. Because you have to know, it says, Da ma lahoshiv lapikares. You have to know what to answer to a heretic. That's really your Yetzer Hara inside. But when, a witness knocks on your door and wants to offer, his savior, you got to know how to answer him. So if Adam could have maintained that kind of approach, so like Avram Avinu, so the Chachamim say, the Chachmei HaEmet, the Mekubalim say regarding Avraham, Ein Ra, there was no evil. Ach Amru Zal, however, they said in Sanhedrin, Shen'aseh min, Shehi Achila Mipiryo, that Adam Rishon was actually ended up becoming a heretic, which means...
Adam Rishon?
Yeah, we mentioned this last time. Yeah, it just means that he ate from the fruit. I mean, that's just what the metaphorical equivalent is. I mean, it really affected him, it disconnected him. Right? Shehi achila mipiryo, that is the eating of the fruit. Kasher ramzu zal, like our sages hinted at in Bereshit Rabbah, shesachata invei rosh v'ishkato, that Chava actually squeezed the grapes from the tree and she gave him to drink. Meaning this is the same metaphor that we've come to many times. Okay? Shehu mashal, this is a metaphor, ela chakirut, to the analysis from human perspective on the nature of reality. Kisochet hazeh, like this person who squeezes the grapes le'achol mipnim yosav, so in order to eat, to consume from its insides.
What's he trying to say in all of this? Saying he's saying let's go with the approach with man's understanding before that he posited that perhaps God only cares about, you could dance and not get scathed. Right.
Okay, so now, v'navo eleinyan. Let's get to the point. Amarhu yitbarach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, says, Halo efshar yidaber ish negdi. How can it be that a person can speak against me? Lama natati lefanav mechshel sheyeh lefanav makom lavo eleinyan eitzahu. How could I have placed before him such a stumbling block that there should be room for him to come to eating from the Eitz Hadat? Meaning, how could I have articulated things in a way that he could have made this erroneous understanding that as long as he doesn't eat from it, he's okay? Meaning, God feels bad, so to speak, now, that because he said, Ki achol mimeno. And this was a matter of contention back and forth. We mentioned so many times that Adam said, well, I thought I couldn't eat from it, or I thought I couldn't take it directly from the tree, right? Whatever it was. So here, if we understand, we read into the words that thought that Adam may have had, as long as I don't eat from it, I can tango, but I can play with matches and not get burnt. So God is saying here, you know what? Maybe, how could I place this stumbling block to have articulated myself in a way that could be understood like that? Therefore God is saying, Hine, behold, im yechuyav l'chol haba elav l'achol mimeno. If he demands, he obligates that all who come afterwards will eat from it, haya kaseh, it would have been difficult. Okay, we have to figure out what this means. Okay, if hine, behold, im yechuyav, if one l'chol haba elav, that anybody would come to him, would be obligated l'chol mimenu, to eat from it, meaning the tree. Anybody who approached the tree would have to eat from it. Haya kasher, would be very difficult. Achefshar yachazik be'emet, it's possible that they would grasp the truth. V'yeda hatov v'ara, they would know good and bad. V'yetze b'shalom v'lo yachata, and they would be able to live in peace and not sin. V'zeh amro, and this is what he means when he says, Hein ha'adam hayaka achad mimeno. Behold, man was like one of us, sarfe kodesh, a fiery seraphim. Ladat tov v'ra, to know good and evil, meaning like God knows tov v'ra. God knows good and evil, otherwise it wouldn't exist. And yet, that doesn't mean that he sins. V'lo yachata. Rak yetze b'shalom. Meaning if man could have been on that level, to know good, meaning he could have engaged in the Eitz Hadat and still it would not have affected him. He can know, meaning somehow the only way he could have been like the angels and like God is as long as he didn't get involved in Tovara, as long as he had some sort of innocent perspective, then he could be spiritually like them. But he could not know Tovara and be innocent of sin. Unlike God and the angels, they know what good and bad is. It doesn't affect them at all. Okay, and therefore that's what that's what the verse says. Hein ha'adam haya ka'achad mimeno, right? Behold, man was like us. Sarfei kodesh, he was like a fiery seraphim. Ladat tovra, to know good and bad. B'yediah v'lo yachata. If he could have been like that, rak yetzeh b'shalom, only to be able to exit in peace. Be'ofen shelo natati lo michshal, in a way that, I did not give him a stumbling block. However, he was not content to stay in the realm of theoretical knowledge alone, but he actually ate, he partook, he experienced v'asham, and became guilty on his choice. And that which he sinned, he must rectify. And if he stays in Gan Eden, he will outstretch his hand. He will not be able to be clean, like we have mentioned before. What is he talking about?
Yes, exactly.
I think over here, perhaps, the Eitz HaChaim is, in this reading, is another reference to the Eitz HaDat.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. Meaning, the problem is that Adam thought that you can engage the tree without eating from it. So here God's saying we can't even have him engage. We can't even let him stretch out his hand to the tree. Now why would this be a problem with Eitz HaChaim? Are we saying we don't want him? Meaning we're still talking about an Eitz HaChaim that makes him live forever. Right? But why are we talking about the Eitz HaDas and stretching your hand? Meaning, what's the significance here to the Eitz HaChaim, this whole discussion about whether Adam could have engaged in the tree of knowledge of good and evil and not sinned or not? What's going on over here? We'll have to leave that for next time.
Yeah, but are you going to come back with some answers?
I hope so. Yeah. I'm not. At this point, I'm not clear on this. So, I'm leaving myself with homework.
Excellent.
Okay. Baruch Hashem, Olam, Amen, Amen.